Let's get started for the second hour. In the first hour we had a lot of project configuration, and now in the second hour, as promised, we'll go into the code. Are there any remaining questions for the first hour? Do we have any loose ends to cover? Any open questions? Yes, question.
The app component SpecTS, what does it do?
Okay.
And what consequences does it have if I delete it?
Okay, first, I don't have an app component SpecTS. The reason why I don't have an app component SpecTS is because I specified skip tests when I created the project. Can you now guess what the SpecTS means?
Yes, I can.
It's the specification for the unit test. SpecTS files are test files. What are the consequences if you delete them? You are deleting your tests, and that's fine. We will definitely take a look at unit testing. You heard it in the curriculum for this year, so you will learn about testing in this course, but currently we ignore the test files. So if you want, you can either ignore them or delete them.
Yes.
It has no bad consequences in the moment. Yeah, okay, it's running. Good. Further questions? Good question, by the way. No further questions? Good. Very good. So let's get started. First, I would like to... yeah, question?
What's the polyfills.ts?
Polyfills.ts. If you open this guy, you will read what polyfills are. Polyfills are necessary to emulate... can you turn down the volume a little bit? Polyfills are necessary to emulate certain browser features on older browsers. It's for backwards compatibility. For instance, if you want to have Internet Explorer support, some older companies need that, then you need to change this file. Otherwise, you can ignore it. Okay? It's for backwards compatibility. Good. Now to the code. First, I would like to recap routing. Have you heard about routing in the past? Yes, I hear some nodding. Good. So let's quickly recap it. I ask you, if you want to follow along, to go into the terminal window and create a new Angular component. How do you create a new Angular component? Yes? ng-generate. Or, even easier, is if you install the NX console in Visual Studio Code, then you can run generate component in a graphical way. You see? You just type in the name of the component. For instance, I don't know, customers, something like this. And if you are happy with it, you can scroll down. Oh, sorry. You can just click on run. It will run the statement, and the result will be the customer component. You see it here? If you don't want to install this extension, you just have to specify this in the command line. You just say, come on, Internet, wake up. Now we're here. ng-generate. You can abbreviate that one, component, customers. That would be the statement. Of course, they are generating it in a longer way. But the NX console is a really nice tool if you do not want to learn all these commands by heart. Did you know about the NX console? It's really useful. It helps. NX console. See? Now you have the customers. And if you take a look, it's just customers works, nothing special. It's okay. Let's add another component just to have two samples. And this time I will do it in the console so you see both ways. ng-generate component orders, for instance. And it will give us, as you can see, the orders component. See it here? By the way, let me emphasize that. The file names and the component selectors, you will see that in a second. For that, please use kebab casing. For classes, use Pascal casing. This is what I want to see from you. So use the small letters here with the dash in the middle. It's like, I don't know the English word, Kebabspieß. Yeah, going through the words. That is why many people call it kebab casing. And the classes are with uppercase letters at the beginning. Methods, fields, props, for that you use camel casing. It starts with a lowercase letter, and then if you have multiple words, use uppercase, okay? Please do that. So in that case, it makes sense to have a file which is called small o orders. And if you take a look at the TypeScript file, we have the orders component with an uppercase O at the beginning. This is how it should look like. And the Angular CLI will do that for you. Good. Now we have two components to play with. So we open up the file app routing module. Yeah, question?
Should I use singular or plural for components?
It depends. It depends. If you have a component showing a list of customers, I would call it customers component. If you have a component for maintaining a single customer form for instance, then I would call it customer component because it deals with a single customer.
So you plan on showing multiple customers in this component?
Correct. It could be a customer list. Exactly. Exactly. So please open up app routing module. And I will quickly show you the code. I will type in a little bit of code. You can follow along if you want. And probably I don't need to describe anything. It's just a repetition, okay? Here we say path, customers, component, customers, component. And path, orders, component, orders component. And last but not least, path, empty, path match, full, or redirect to, I don't know, whatever, customers. Probably you can guess what's going to happen here. If I specify nothing, and I mean really nothing, not any letter, okay, then I get redirected to the route customers. And the route customers will display the customers component. If I enter orders, then I will be redirected to the orders component. Okay? I can demo that. Let's go into the browser. And as you can see, if I delete the customers up here, I will immediately get to the customers again. If I type in orders, it will say orders works. Got it? Very simple. Of course, we can do way more elaborate things here. We can pass in parameters and react on parameter changes and things like that. But that will be a different story for a different lecture. That's just the basics that we want to recap quickly. Any questions to that? Should be pretty clear, right? By the way, here we have this customers component. Here we have this orders component. How does Angular even know that these two components exist? Is it enough to just create these files and Angular will magically know about them?
They are they are in the app module.
Correct. In the app module files, you have the declarations, and here you see all the components that are available in your app. And down here, we can also import stuff from other libraries. We will use that when we use, for instance, Angular Material. Okay?
Stopping, ist das Ihre App?
Oh, ja, danke. Mal vergessen. Vielen Dank. Danke. Correct, that's the app module. Hey, we already have the customers component, the orders component in here. Did we do that manually? No. Who added these two lines for us in this file? Yeah? The ng generate command. Exactly, Angular. Exactly. Good. Could everybody who wants to follow along? Does routing work? Yes, question.
Show it again, please. I forgot to add the routing, so I had to do it.
Here. Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep it on the screen for a second. For the Matura and for the exams, you will definitely need to create routes. It is very likely for the Matura and for the exam that you will get a ready-made empty project from me. So you will very likely not need to execute ng-new. But the generated project will have empty routes as seen here. So you have to understand how to create routes. And in the course of this semester, you will learn how to do more complex things here. Are we good?
Yeah.
Good. Now let's take a look at the, come on, here it is. Let's take a look at the app component HTML. See here Angular, hello Angular, see here router outlet. The router outlet here is a placeholder for the selected route. So hello Angular is always appearing on top of the route that we are currently on. So if I go to customers, I will get customers work and still hello Angular. So typically what you do is on top of the router outlet, you just do something like display main menu, and down here something like, I don't know, display footer, e.g. copyright. Okay? We will not do that now, but in the second semester we will do user interface design, and then we will think about how to build such things in a more professional way. For now, it's just a conceptual view. We have a header, we have a footer, everything is okay. Let's build a poor man's menu. Let's do a div. No, let's do an unordered list. Let's do a list item. Let's build an anchor tag with an href. Go to customers, something like this. And then we'll do a list item with an anchor tag, orders, and go to orders. So this is a very, very trivial menu, but it should work. If I quickly switch to the browser, you see, orders, customers, orders, customers. Looks good. But it is wrong. I made a very, very critical mistake. Which one? Why is this working but wrong? Either you forgot it or it is something new again. Let me show you what's going on behind the scenes. Let's fire up the browser, go into the network tab, and in the network tab we will click around. See? Every time I switch between the modules, the browser loads a lot of stuff. See? If I switch to customers, it loads 3.4 megabytes. That's huge. Does it make sense that the browser reloads the entire app every time I switch between two different modules? Obviously not. So I think you were first.
I think the thing that's wrong here is that those two are just links and not actually routing.
Those two are just correct. And what is the concrete mistake that I made here? This is wrong. Does anybody know what would be the correct attribute here?
I only know how to do it in script language.
In Angular, it is router link. Please change href to router link. Okay? Both hrefs should be replaced with router link. A router link is a parameter folder, as the name suggests, router. That means, let me show you that, if I switch between the modules, nothing is loaded from the server. Nothing at all. The entire app is downloaded when the user accesses the website for the first time. After that, only data is transferred, no user interface. So remember this one, router link, okay? Important. Nice. Good. Let's practice that for a final time and then go into the data bindings topic. So please fire up the terminal again and generate a new component, and we will call it data binding basics. I will do the following. ng generate component data binding basics. Fire it up. Done. You see, the Angular CLI will automatically translate your Pascal casing into kebab casing. That is done automatically. You don't need to do that manually. Let's add the routing, app routing module. We will need to add another route, path, let's call it binding, component. Now let me show you a trick. You probably know this trick, but maybe you are not aware of that you can apply it here. Data binding basics. See, DBB, data binding basics, and I can add a C here, because now it's data binding basics component, and I just need to press enter, and I save a lot of typing. Okay, so use the Pascal casing uppercase letters, and it is very fast to generate. Oops, sorry, here. Good. Last but not least, go into the app component HTML and add another list item to our menu. This one. Anchor router link equals to binding. Oops, typo. Good. If you didn't screw up, then you should have another menu item. The menu item is, come on, Internet, here. I can click on it, and it should say data binding basics work. Please do that. I will show you the code again. ng generate, create a route, add it to your main menu, done. That should not be a problem for you during exam or Matura. Nice, nice, nice. I will open up data binding basics HTML, and side by side I will open up data bindings basics.typescript. If possible, please open up both files side by side so we see them directly on one screen. Good? By the way, these files are connected through the template URL. See that one? The template URL contains the path to the HTML file, and the HTML file is the template. We will not talk about styling in the moment, We will talk about styling in way more details in the upcoming weeks. Good. Yeah, let's try some. Yeah, question.
Oh, never mind. I found.
Good. Now let's do the basic stuff about data binding. If you want, you can follow along. If you just want to follow in your mind and make some notes, it's perfectly fine too. I will call it H2, say data binding. And then I will start with some basic stuff about data binding. It's just a repetition, and maybe you don't know some of the things that I'm going to show you here. First thing, let's create in TypeScript a variable, public answer, and let's set it to, 42. If I want to display data which I have in my TypeScript file, I can do a so-called interpolation. That means I can write the answer is double curly brace answer. This is a so-called interpolation. Take a look. The answer is 42. Very, very simple. I absolutely require that you know this. This is something that you shouldn't, there should not be the necessity to look it up. You have to remember this one, double curly brace, okay? The beauty of Angular, and you do not need to type that in, I will delete this code in a second. The beauty of Angular is that it detects changes automatically. Let me demonstrate that to you. Set interval, here. Let's do a small callback and set this dot answer plus plus, so increase it by 1, and let's do that every second. And if we take a look here on the browser, see, it immediately starts ticking. Woohoo! That's the beauty of data binding in Angular. You just change the TypeScript value and it just works. No need for get document element by ID or something crazy like that. Just change the TypeScript value and it just works. Got it? Good. So that was just to demonstrate how easy this is in Angular. Good. Next one. Let's put a button here. Let's call it reset. And this button should set our answer, I don't know, to 43. I have no better idea. For that, we will need an event binding. And you just say, round braces, click. And then you specify the name of the TypeScript method that should be called on click, something like this. Then you can go to TypeScript and say public on click, something like this, and say this.answer equals to 43. This is an event binding. Can you remember what this was called? Yeah, interpolation, and this is an event binding. And if you take a look, go here, go to data binding, click on reset, and you see the value is 43. Awesome. You can definitely give parameters to this method. So what you could say is you could say new answer is a number and set it to new answer and then pass in the 43 here in the onClick. That's absolutely no problem, and you see reset 43, everything's fine. That's an event handler. And of course, you can react on many, many different events depending on what the browser supports. Got it? And now I will tell you a secret, but you have to promise me that you will forget it again immediately, or at least you are not allowed to tell anybody that I told you, okay? See, I can copy this button, and I can do crazy stuff here. I can just say answer, whoops, equals 44. And with that, click, it still works, and we don't need to write this logic in TypeScript. Don't do that in real life, okay? So children, don't try that at home. It's dangerous. No, I'm just joking, of course. This is not considered good practice. So if you build logic, application logic, it should be written in TypeScript. But the reality is that you can do certain things, like assignments, directly here in Angular. And I think you asked whether this is TypeScript, and this is not TypeScript. This is the Angular template language, which looks like TypeScript. But you couldn't, for instance, write a for loop here. It's not possible. It's Angular, not TypeScript. Good, so let's delete this guy again here. Nice, nice, nice. Let's take an input. Input, type equals number, and then I want to specify the value of the input. And the value should be the answer, right? The answer should be now data binding to the right-hand side. Let's see if it works. Guess what? It doesn't work. I don't see 42. Why? Now comes the next thing. This one, value, is an HTML DOM property. This here is just a text. If I change that one to text, and I take a look here, I will see the name answer here. It's a string. It's not interpreted as a TypeScript variable name. In order to make this a data binding, I need to specify this one, the square brackets. The square brackets are a one-way data binding. That means that the answer here from TypeScript is bound to this DOM property. And then we will have 42 in our value. Got it? So again, let's repeat that. Interpolation, normal braces, round braces, event binding, square brackets, data binding, one-way data binding. But what do you think if we change the content of the input to, let's say, 50? Why doesn't this one change? We just changed it to 50, yes?
Just like you said before, it's a one-way.
It's a one-way binding. Writing is like this means we get the value from TypeScript into HTML, but we do not get it back. So if I change that one to green, and if I would draw an arrow here from down here, up here, and this is not done. So this is not done currently because it's a one-way binding. How can we change it to a two-way binding? Yes?
We need the bananas and calibrate this.
We need the banana in a box binding, correct? But for that, we need to enable something. Go back to app module, and in order to have two-way data binding available, the banana in a box binding, you will see that in a second, we need to add the forms module. The forms module. You see that one? It's from Angular. It comes out of the box. In the imports section, you need to add the forms module. And if you have that one, we can change this one to a binding like that. It's not finished yet, but do you see? The braces here are looking like bananas, and the square brackets around them are looking like a box. And this is why this kind of binding is called the banana in a box binding. It's easy to remember like that. And in the middle, between our two bananas, we need ng modal. It is like it is. You have to remember that one. ng for Angular, modal for data modal. Just trust me. It makes sense. I could describe in very much details why it is called ng modal and what this does, but for now, just trust me, it makes sense. And if you do that one, then you can change the input here in the data bindings area. See? And they are always aligned because we now have two-way binding. We now have a binding from TypeScript to HTML and from HTML to TypeScript. Not difficult, but you have to remember it. So we have interpolation, we have event binding, we have one-way binding, and we have the banana in the box binding, the two-way binding. I guess now, I hope things are coming back, right? Most of these things you covered last year. It's a repetition to get into it again. Next one. Please add a paragraph and right here, oh, that is a large number. And now let me quickly write the next kind of binding. You will immediately understand what I mean. Star ng if answer larger than 50. It is really not difficult. If I go here and make it larger, 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 let's see, and here we are. Oh, that's a large number. Put it there, put it away, do it here. It's really not difficult to understand. The next special character here, star. Does anybody know how this kind of binding is called? Not interpolation, not one-way binding, not two-way binding, but structural binding. Structural binding because depending on this condition here, parts of the HTML is removed. Got it? Structural binding star ng if. Next one. Let's create a new variable in TypeScript. Let's call it public answers. And this time, I'm going to allow multiple answers. 1, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. What are these numbers? Every programmer should immediately recognize these numbers. Fibonacci, exactly, that's the Fibonacci numbers, and so on, of course. Now what I want to do here on the left-hand side, I would like to, H3, answers. I would like to display all answers. How do I do that? I will write it down, and probably you will no longer after that need any explanation because it's pretty obvious. UL, LI, I heard it already, ng4, let A of answers, and use an interpolation A. Just a for loop. Very simple. Structural binding because we change the structure of the HTML. And you see, here are our answers. ng4, structural binding. Now you might ask yourself, oh my God, how should I remember all this stuff during the exam, for instance? The answer is pretty simple. There is, luckily, an Angular cheat sheet. If you look for Angular cheat sheet and you scroll down a little bit to template syntax, then you will see all the different possibilities here in a nice cheat sheet. ng if, ng4, ng switch, ng class, ng style. There are many, many more things. Here you see two-way binding. So just Google for Angular cheat sheet and that will help you a lot during your exams. Of course, those basic stuff that I showed you here, you should simply know that. If you have to even look up the syntax of ngIf, then you will probably run out of time during an exam. But Angular cheat sheet is your friend in that regards. Are we good? Okay. Last two things, and then we are going to another example. I have the following requirement. Write this text in red if answer is greater than 75. How would you solve this problem? Because of the large fonts, I will now not display the code side by side, but I will just work like that. How would you go and solve this problem here? Write this text in red if the answer is even larger, 75. Yes?
I can use a variable and data binding.
And data binding, but which kind of data binding? You're right. It's
One way, because you only have to read.
one-way binding, but you need a special kind of one-way binding. You need a so-called style or class binding. Let me show you what I mean with that. What we can say is we can say here in this P up here, we can say one-way binding exactly as you proposed, style.color equals to answer greater 75. Question mark, red, colon, black. Do you know the inline if syntax from TypeScript, C, C#? Yes? Good. Now if we try that one, go here, and I change this one to 75, nothing happens, but if I make it 76, we get it in red. You probably cannot see that on the video beamer, but believe me, it's really red. Okay? This is a so-called style binding. If the expression on the right-hand side results in a proper color name, then in this case, color is set. And you cannot just change the color here, you can change any property which you can manipulate with CSS styles. You have a question?
Yes. Does the style binding, it works with strings? What happens if I do a spelling mistake?
If you do a spelling mistake, it will probably not be red. So if I change that one,
Knows it in real time, or if I have to compile it, it just doesn't work.
this is not checked at the compile time. Now I understand what you mean. If you go to elements and you select this one, and we make it a little bit larger here, then you see that this, is still black, even if we are above 75. But we will not get a compiler error here. This is not checked at compile time. It is a string. Okay? Good. In practice, you shouldn't do it like that. Because as we all know, we don't want to have things like color values inside of HTML. Where should formatting be? Not in HTML, not in TypeScript, but in? Go on. I hear some mumbling, but I don't hear the answer. Yeah? CSS, right. And this is exactly what we are going to do. Please open the data binding basics as CSS. And there we just say dot highlight. It's just an arbitrary name. You can call it Hansi if you want, but highlight makes sense. Color red. And then we can make our code way more interesting. We can say class dot highlight answer above 75. And now it's beautiful. You see, this class name here is applied if the answer is greater 75. And this class name will change the color to red. And now we have the color value in CSS. The logic is here in HTML. We could even argue that we want to build a Boolean variable inside of TypeScript and check that one. That is, you can do it either way. See, here, let's try it. 75, 76, it's red. Go down, it's black again. By the way, what is this SCSS all about? It's not CSS, there is an S in front of the CSS. Special CSS. It's like special secret service, or what do you mean? SCSS stands for syntactically awesome CSS. And this is essentially like TypeScript is to JavaScript. So what we are currently writing is this one. It's Sass. To be more, I did it wrong, sorry. We wrote SCSS, and here you say CSS. That's the old one. And just for a quick glance into the future, SCSS allows powerful variables and way more stuff. So in practice, don't use CSS. In practice, use SCSS or Sass or Less or Stylus or something like this. We are going to use SCSS, and in the second semester we will quickly take a look at some SCSS stuff. If you use Angular Material, you are probably kind of forced into SCSS. Who is doing the presentation about Bootstrap in Angular? I want to hear about how to use Bootstrap with SCSS. Okay. That definitely has to be mentioned. Okay? Good. Nice. This is the so-called class binding. In general, prefer class bindings over style bindings. It's better to have the color values and font sizes and so on in CSS and not in HTML. Any questions so far? Nice. So these were the most important things that you need to survive data binding in Angular. Let's quickly recap it, then we'll do a short break, and then we will practice everything again, but this time in a more meaningful sample. We are going to do the ultimate basic demo in any UI framework, which is a to-do list. Of course, we have to implement a to-do list, right? We will do that. But let's quickly recap again. This is called, what is the name of this one? This is an interpolation. Right, this is an event binding. This is a two-way binding, banana in a box binding. Right. This is a structural binding. This is a class binding, one-way binding. Correct. Exactly. This is what we needed. And to be honest, with these kinds of bindings, you can solve, let's say, 50 to 60% of all the problems that you might have in Angular. Of course, there are many details about it, and you can read it in the cheat sheet. If you really want to know all the possibilities, for instance, for an ng-if, you might ask yourself, is there an else statement too for ng-if? Then please do the following. Go to the Angular documentation, here docs. Go to reference, here it's called reference, see? Go to the API reference. Type in what you're looking for, ng-if, for instance. Take a look at the ng-if, and if you scroll down, you will see lots of descriptions, and for instance here, your question would be answered. If, ng-if, else block, and then you see down here ng template, else block. So what I wanted to tell you is the documentation of Angular is pretty good. It's a strong point for Angular. Many other JavaScript frameworks have poor documentation, but Angular documentation, it wasn't always great, but nowadays it's really good. Take a look at the reference, and there you find all the details that you need in order to succeed with these data bindings, okay? Especially ngFor, ngIf, and so on. Good. Nice. With that, we have, time is flying. We have finished another hour. We now have a short break. At 1:40, 20 minutes before 2, we will go into the fourth and last hour of today's programming course, okay? Now, short break.